Well, hello there, friends. How are you? It is great to see you here live on this Thursday lunchtime. I have Amber here helping me behind the scenes. So thank you, Amber. She'll be here to help with any questions that happen to miss in the chat. So today we are talking all about paper. Paper is the number one thing that I get questions about. So some of the things we'll be talking about today are creating signatures, trimming signatures, why is the edge of my book wobbly? We'll be talking about working against the paper grain, how many pages to put in my signatures. So those are the questions that I've had in ahead of time. And then if you have any others, feel free to pop them in the comments and I will answer them live. Okay, let's dive in to the first question. First question is, when I fold all of my paper pages together for a signature, the outside edges don't line up perfectly. Is this normal? Yes, it is normal. It's very normal. Let me flip my camera over. Most of the time I'll be working on my table today. So I'm going to flip my camera down and show you why this happens and how you can alleviate that or do something about it. So just give me 1 second to make sure I get the right. No, that's not what I want. There we go. That's what I want. Okay, so when you create a signature, let's make sure we're in the. When you create a signature, you're going to try to have all your pages the same size. Preferably, unless they're torn. And you are going to ideally have your paper grain going this way, because I'm folding this way, so we want it in the same direction as the fold. I'm not going to go over paper grain in detail today, so there is a video below which tells you, which gives you sort of more about paper grain in detail. So I have a stack of 2, 3, 4, 8, I believe, 8 pages here for my signature. This is a 80-pound drawing paper. So you're going to bang them on the edge, and then if you possibly can, stand up so you can look directly down onto the pages so that you can line up the edges as best you can. I'm not going to do that because otherwise my head would be in the way. You're going to line up the bottom edge and then the sides. This is called your foredge. You're going to line them up as best you can and just bone fold them. But what you're going to see right along here is the inner pages creep forward. So it almost creates like a triangle effect right there. That's normal. You're not doing anything wrong. That is completely normal. Here's the spine of our signature where it's folded. And this is called the foredge. And this, where these pages come forward, it's called foredge creep. If I had super thin pages and I only had, say, 2 pages, they might not creep forward, but generally speaking, foredge creep is really, really normal. So how can you get rid of it? Okay, apparently we had sound issues. So if you're here live, thank you for your patience. And if folks are watching the recording, I'm probably going to edit that out. So let's get back to trimming. You saw my hand actions. So basically what I was saying, folks, is that let's try it with this. Let's do another signature, shall we? Let's create this signature right here. We've got these 4 handmade pages. And when I stack them together, you can see here we have this overhang at the edge. Like these inner pages poke out. Now it's more pronounced because this is a hand-torn paper. But the principle is exactly the same. You would measure and mark where you want to trim. Let's do it all again. I'm lucky I've got my watch on today so that we could, I got a text. Okay, so we would measure again. Oh, look, it's 4.5 again in 3 little places. We would, remember this is a fresh blade. And then we would either just cut straight against the triangle like that, or we'd use a metal ruler. This is safer, I will say, to have some metal here. If you push this up against here, this might shift. So this is safer And then just make sure it's at a 90-degree angle, and then you just go in and slice. So this is going to give you, when you're making individual signatures, this is going to give you a lovely flat edge, just like that, rather than the, you know, the 4-edge creep that we had before. Okay, so that's going to give you a nice straight edge. And there was the one that I did earlier with no sound. But a question that I get a lot is, people understand that principle, but what they don't understand is, why is it once the book is bound, do we still get an uneven edge? So you can see here, this edge, this is my 4-edge. You can see it from above, it's not flat. So you would think, oh, because all my signatures were perfectly cut, this would be flat, but that is just not the case, because this spine here is hand sewn, and our tension might be slightly different for each signature that we sew in. I mean, hopefully not, but it happens that this is rarely smooth. This one here is a little bit better. You can see it along here, but not much. And I'm fairly accurate with my cutting, but it's very unusual for a handmade book to have a super smooth edge along there. But if you are absolutely determined to have a super smooth edge there, you've got a couple options. You can go to Kinko's or a copy shop, and they may be able to put this in their guillotine. You may be able to open up your book like this and guillotine it. You can purchase a guillotine from somewhere like binding.com. There's hundreds of dollars, but you can buy a guillotine to get that nice edge. Or if you would like to invest in a bookbinding tool called a plow, you can do that. You just have to Google a plow for bookbinding. So P-L-O-U-G-H, like as in the plow that a horse would pull, or a, I don't know, locks. So it's a tool which you put the book into a press, like a lying press, like this. So it's squished between, it's held steady, and then if you're using a hand plow, it's a tool with a blade that gently slices off the edge here, the 4-edge, to make it perfectly smooth. So it's kind of, it like shaves it so that it's perfectly smooth. So that is another option if you want to invest in a professional bookbinding tool. So there are small handheld ones, and then there are larger ones. But that is a specialized tool. I don't own one because I don't make those kind of bindings. So that's another option. A third option for you is if it just is making you lose your mind, what you can do is go to a company like Tallis or Hollanders, and you can purchase pre-made book blocks like this. So this one is from Hollanders, I believe. And you see it's perfectly smooth, perfectly smooth. And it's already bound, and then you're going to case that into a hardcover. So you would make the hardcover and then put some end sheets on here and then case it in. So they've obviously made this with a machine, and it's perfectly smooth. Tallis also has, Tallis has Cardi paper ones. Now, hold on, let me just take that wrapping off. So they've actually kept their 4-edge torn because, you know, Cardi paper is a handmade Indian paper, which is delicious. But they have used the machine on the top and the bottom. You can see it's very smooth. So these 2 edges are very smooth. So that's been cut probably, I would say, with a guillotine. And then it's been pre-bound for you. So it's been sewn and glued. So that is another option for you if you really feel strongly that your edges have to be super smooth. But sadly, it's just not an option. Oh, here's the, that's how you spell the plow for bookbinding. Sadly, it's just when we're making handmade books, to get a completely smooth 4-edge, it's pretty much impossible. If you have a smaller notebook like we did last week, what you can do, so say you only had like, let's just say this was like a couple, say you had a book that was a couple signatures and they were sewn together. What you can do is use a metal ruler and weight it down with a brick. Whoops. You can weight it down with a brick and then use your sharp knife again to trim up the sewn book. But that really, you can't, that's very difficult to do with a book that has already been bound like this. You could try it, but it would be really hard. But you certainly could try laying, here's my book. You could certainly try laying a metal ruler and a brick and then using a sharp knife. What tends to happen is it kind of goes concave, kind of, it just never seems to work for me, but you may have better luck. So those are my tips. All right, let me get to the next question. I'm trying to keep my space tidy so that I can show off what I need to show off. The next question is scoring. What tool do you use for scoring? And my bone folder from Hollanders isn't working great for scoring. I understand, because oftentimes our bone folders can be quite thick at the end, especially if you've got a Teflon bone folder. So there are lots of different things you can use for scoring. I'll show you my favorite. I'm just going to use this piece of paper here. Many of you know that my favorite is this knife. It's called a cobbler's knife, and it's used for cutting on one side, and then this side is kind of maybe 1 millimeter thick, so I like to use this. And then the other thing I like to use is, you know, in vintage shops or antique shops, or even thrift stores, you can get those bone handled knives. They're butter knives. They've got like a round edge. They're also really good for scoring. I forgot to bring one from home. If your paper is on the thicker side, you could use the tip of your scissors. Just don't use this on very delicate paper, but you could use the tip like that for scoring. That definitely is a little more abrasive than a blunt knife. If you have a stylus, you could also use that. If you own a pair of dividers like this is a bookbinding tool. These are often used for scoring. So it's similar to the tip of this. Oh, sorry, it's hard to say. They're similar to the tip of the scissors. That doesn't, I mean, that's sharp-ish, but it doesn't make me bleed. So that is another tool for scoring. Another one is, if I can find it, this is a type of bone folder called a hera, and I actually got this at it's made in Japan. They use it for sashishko, I believe, and other types of Japanese sewing, and it's plastic, and it has, it's almost like a little, feels like a little spoon. This end is rounded, but this tip here can be used for scoring, and then it has a sharper tip right there for scoring as well. It's gone, I've seen it called an Hera, but it may also be called another tool as well. So feel free to pop that in the chat if you know what it's called. So that is also, and this works better on delicate paper. So say you had a very, I don't know, some calligraphy paper, you could use this tool here and it would not damage as much. And then finally, some of you may be familiar with something called a score pal, and that is, oops, this is a scoreboard or a score pal. Well, the company is called Score Pal. This is a scoreboard. It's a bit too big to get in the frame, I'm afraid. This has a scoring tool with it, and you use this to, so say I have, let's take this poor piece of paper, handmade paper, it's going to get like scored and cut to death. Let's just say it's, I wanted to score it at 3 inches. You would stick the tip of the scoring tool in the 3-inch mark and then drag downwards. So, and I'll be showing you this tool again in a minute, but that's another option too for scoring, this scoring tool. All right. Now, the next question, what happens if I want to use paper that's going against the grain? So let's just say that you have a, let's say you're working with this paper here. It's a watercolor paper from Canson. And just because of the shape of the book you want to create, you know that you're going to be folding that paper against the grain. And you're just like, that's just what I got to do. Sorry. So let me find, oh, things are in here. So here's my paper. I've taken off the little perforated section, whatever that's called. And I know for a fact that the grain runs this way. And the reason I know that is I did my paper grain score, but also this, when the spine is right here, that is often an indicator that the grain is going to run parallel to this spine that the manufacturers put on, with this, what you call it, spiral binding. 9 times out of 10, if the spiral binder is going this direction, your grain is going to be going that direction. You always want to check though. So, for example, this paper here, the spine is going this way, but I decided to go in this direction. Let me find my examples. So I cut them in half. So I have these 2 halves right here. You see that? These 2 halves. And these are folded with the grain, and they look fine. They're just, this is nice and smooth. It looks really good. This one, however, I split the paper in 2, but I went against the grain. So against this spiral edge. And can you see how it's cracked? So that's not going to make such a great signature. It's also going to be harder to close. Like that's probably not going to close. But all is not lost. You can still do this. So what you can do is you can press the heck out of it with your bone folder. You can also put it under some weights, but you can also score it. So I'm going to just grab this handy score pal again. You could use a quilting ruler as well. Sorry about the light. You could use a quilting ruler. You could measure it and mark with a pencil. But here's my piece of paper. The grain is going this way, but I want to fold my paper this way to create a book. I'm going to find the middle and then score before I fold. And then that is going to get rid of this sort of broken spine right there. So this is about 10. So I'm going to score at 5. And what I may do is even score on the back. Here we go. Once we fold this over, it still may not lay flat, but oh heavens. Sorry. There we go. So this is this looks a whole lot better than this because we scored it. It might be hard to see on the camera, but trust me, this looks really cracked and broken and is really not great. Whereas this, because it's been scored, is good. All right, what other questions were there? And I did have notes, but apparently I didn't even refer to the notes, so there we go. My next question that we had through was, how many pages should I include in my signature? This feels like the $1 million question, how many pages? As a rule of thumb, the number of pages that you're going to use in your book, it's going to be determined by the thickness of the paper and the type of stitch that you're going to do. So if you, the thinner the paper, generally the more pages you can put in a signature, and then the thicker the paper, the less pages you're going to put in a signature. That's not always the case though. So let me just show you some examples. So here is the same binding. This is a Coptic binding with the same board attachment. So we went through the edge of the covers to attach the board. That's neither here nor there. But this is the same stitch. But you see how much thicker these signatures are compared to these? And look at the difference in the stitch. This gives us like a big open stitch, whereas this gives us a neat sort of tight little stitch. Personally, I prefer this type, you know, this, the way this looks, but those are exactly the same binding. But because we went with much thinner signatures, so less pages inside each signature, it gave us a completely different look on the spine. So if we look inside this book and you look at these chunky signatures, I mean, they're huge. They're like 4 handmade paper. Oh no, there's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. There's 5. So there's a wrapper and 4 pages inside. That's a thick signature. If I were to do this book again, I would only put 2 of these pages in each signature, not 4. And then that would give me a look which is a lot more like this. But I mean, it's just personal preference. This one here, there's only 2 in each signature. And that gives us, in my opinion, a nicer look or a different look. So that is one way to determine how many pages you want in a signature. Let me show you another example. Here's the same type of binding. It's a French link binding. These signatures here are a lot thicker, so it gives us a much bigger stitch, whereas these signatures are skinnier, so it gives us a much finer French link stitch right there. So again, just sort of personal preference. Let me show you another example though. Sometimes, so in some books, you've got lots of signatures, like this has got 10 or 12 signatures in it. However, some binding styles, you can only have, say, so this one right here, you can see the binding style is such that you've only got 3 signatures. So because you're going to have a decorative spine like this, if we had very thin signatures like we do here, we'd have these ridiculously tiny cross stitches, and we'd have too many holes in this spine. So in this one, this binder, we've got to do 3 signatures. So we're going to do much chunkier signatures for this type of binding. So if we want a binding that really shows off the stitch like this, we're going to use more signatures, thinner signatures, less pages inside. And for this one, we're going to use chunkier ones because that's what we need for this stitch. As a general rule of thumb, though, if I am using, say, this watercolor paper from Canson, I'm probably only going to put, what's 140 pounds or 300 GSM? I'm probably only going to put 2 inside each signature, unless I need a big chunky one. And then if I'm using, say, a thinner mixed media paper like this, this is a mixed media paper, I'm probably going to put 4 in there for a regular signature. For, say, a binding like this, a French link. And then if I've got drawing paper that's, say, 80 pounds, I'm going to use 6. And then if I've got a much thinner paper, like a sketch, like a 50-pound sketch, I might use 6 to 8 or even 10. Well, more like 8 to 10, actually. But it's like a judgment call, really, on how many pages go in each signature. That was like a long explanation. Okay. How do I protect my handmade paper covers? So many of you like to make books like me with handmade paper. You can see a whole bunch of them. This also is a handmade paper. It's also handmade paper. There's another one, another handmade paper. So, but they do get some wear and tear, particularly if you're going to be putting this inside, in and out of your bag or something, or it's going on a trip with you. So what do you do to protect this outside? My go-to is matte medium. I put several layers of, I put actually 2 to 3 layers of golden matte medium, or any of the other brands is fine. Utrecht is a really nice brand. Liquitex is fine. But I put a matte medium on here. And like I say, several layers. And I generally put the matte medium on after I've sewn the book. So I've sewn this, and then I'll make sure that I get matte medium like all along these edges here, where there's probably going to be more wear and tear. I might put a little bit on the inside, but it's more the outside that I'm concerned with. So I usually put it on afterwards. I would not use Mod Podge. If you have it, by all means, but I've been told that this yellows over time, and I don't particularly want my paper to yellow. I have also tried Dorland's wax, but I find because of the cotton fibers in the handmade paper, it tends to absorb into the paper, and it may well be giving it protection, but I just don't. I feel like I have to use a lot of this on the handmade paper, and it is pretty pricey. So if you have this, I think it would work, but you just might need to put quite a lot of layers on. And I feel like this is a more cost-effective method for protecting your handmade paper. All right, those are the questions that we got in ahead of time. Are there any others, Amber, that have come in while I've been chatting? Let me have a look. Great question, Lucy. So Lucy asks, if you have a chance, can you go over cover papers? I get confused, especially when it comes to not using craft text, cork or leather. How do you use pretty papers that people use? Book cloth. How do you use pretty papers that people use? So you just, when you're using a decorative paper for a cover, it's going to depend if it's a soft cover or hard cover. So if you want a soft cover book, you do need to make sure that it's sturdy enough to withstand sort of being open and closed. So if you find you have, oftentimes I'll find a paper and I'll make it work because I really want to use that paper. If I'm organized and I'm thinking ahead of time, which I don't generally, I would think, okay, I'm going to want to make some paste papers, and I know I'm going to want to use them for book covers. So I would plan ahead to say, make those paste papers on a thicker paper, like watercolor paper, a good quality mixed media paper. But oftentimes I've made the paste paper 6 months ago, and now I want to use it as a cover. So generally what I do is I'll reinforce it. So I will put some kind of cover. So with, say, paste papers, I'll use the Dorland's wax, or with the handmade paper, I'll use, I'll protect it. But if it's too thin, I'll back it with something else. So I'll back it with another type of paper to stiffen it up. In terms of using book cloth for soft covers, you could, but you would probably want to stiffen it also with something else to make it open and close better. I really like canvas for a fabric cover, for a soft fabric cover. So I'm like duck cloth or canvas is really nice. That doesn't need to be backed with any kind of paper. But the other option is to do, a hard cover, is to wrap a piece of book board or chipboard with that thinner paper for the book cover. And then that way you can kind of get away with whatever you want if you want to do a hard binding. I hope that answers the question. I'm not sure it does, but I guess essentially if it's a thin paper and you really want to use it, just back it with something else. And then the way you can back it is I will often back papers with glue stick rather than PVA, because the PVA might make it bubble and wrinkle. So I'll often use some glue stick or even spray adhesive to join it together. But if the papers are on the thicker side, you could use PVA and then just press it so that you don't get any wrinkles in it. I hope that answers your question, Lucy. If not, pop some more questions in the chat. Kathleen says, what's the difference between rough and smooth Cardi paper? I have never used the rough. I felt the rough. I have a sample pack from Talus or from Hiromi. And it's the same difference between the cold press watercolor paper, which it's like rough. It's got like a rough surface with like little dips in it. And then the hot press watercolor, which is really smooth. So it's the same thing with the Cardi paper. It's nice and smooth. It's almost like it's been ironed. It's got like a slight sheen to it. And that I would say is the best one to use for any kind of mixed media work or pen work. If you use the rough one, it's just going to have a lot more texture, which would probably be really good for watercolor, but not so much for pen work. So it's just the surface texture is different on the rough and the smooth, like watercolor paper. Celtic Peasant says, what is Cardi paper? It's divine. I could marry Cardi paper. It is 100% cotton handmade paper from India. And well, as I've probably shown you, can't feel it. It's lovely. So because it's 100% cotton, it's going to last a long time. And because it's handmade. It will also last a long time. It doesn't have a grain, so it makes books. It's really nice to make a book from Cardi paper because you don't need to worry which way you're folding. It comes in different colors, mostly white, but you can get black, gray, tan. It comes in smooth and rough surfaces, like I just explained, and then it comes in a variety of weights. So I think, which one is this? I think, hold on, I'm just looking at the this one right here. Oh, it doesn't say what it is, the pre-made book block. I use the 210 smooth. That's my favorite. I think there's a thinner one. There might be a thin one, but then no, I think there's two thicker ones, like a 320 and a 640. And they are heavy. Like I ordered a sheet of the black 320. It was heavy. It was I used it for a photo album, and it was really nice and thick, but I could never use it for book pages, but I could use it for a book cover. So yes, that's what Cardi paper is. It's divine. And I included a link below to several sources of Cardi paper. I've also linked below to several of my favorite papers that I use in my books. So what other questions are there? Any others? Any others? What is the best type of stitch binding for pages to lie flat when open with my watercolor paper 140? The stitch binding, I would go with a Coptic binding or a Secret Belgian binding, or this is a French link binding. They also open pretty flat. So that's the French link binding. And then here is the Coptic binding. And the reason being is that there's a gap right here. There's a gap between the stitches. That's what allows it to open nice and flat like that. So I would go with any of those sort of stitches like this. So there's a French link stitch that will also open nice and flat. What's more important though for opening flat will be well, not more important, but just when you're using 140-pound watercolor paper, I would just use a couple in each signature. That'll make it easier for it to open flat. Because if you've got, say, 4 in each signature, like the middle. So here, for example, this is the big chunky book. So towards the end of the signature, it opens flat, but then when you get to the middle with the 4 pages, it doesn't lie flat as much. But if I had just a couple pages like this one, I've got too many books on the table, is all I'm saying. Oh, here we go. Here it is. With this book here that's only got like 2 pages inside each signature, it lies flat a lot more easily. So just keep the signatures thin and you'll have better flatness, I guess is what I'm saying. And make sure your grain goes in the right direction. What other questions are there? Is there an archival quality glue stick? Oh, that's a good question. I don't know if... I'm going to ask our community to... I think there are a couple of archival glue sticks. This is the one that most people use, but I don't know if it's archival. So I don't know if it off the top of my head. This one says without solvent, which says to me that it might be archival, but I would not like to. I would have to do some research to find out for you, Marsha. So I will do that. But if anyone else knows, please drop in the comments if you know of an archival glue stick. There has to be them. What other questions? Oh, great question, Tree. Under what circumstances is paper grain direction not or less relevant? I'm thinking in terms of lighter paper. Yeah. So I think that one might have been on my notes, which I left on the printer. So yeah, the thinner the paper, the less you have to worry about the grain. So do I have a couple of examples? I do. Well, these 2 examples here of this watercolor paper. When the paper's thick, 140-pound watercolor paper, I do worry about the grain because of the cracking and the springing open. But when a paper is thinner, like this book right here, has got some much thinner Mohawk Superfine paper, I think it's like 60 pounds, then you get less cracking if you go against a grain, and you're able to get it a lot flatter. So let's think. I'm just trying to think what I'm trying to say here. Pay attention to paper grain if you can, particularly if your paper is thicker. But if you want to work with thinner paper and you want to go against the grain, it's really fine. You really don't have to worry about it quite as much. You have to worry about it more also if you have like a covered spine. So if you're worried about paper grain of boards, for example, like this hardcover board, you really want to make sure that the 3 pieces of this cover, the grain goes the right way, otherwise it'll warp. And the same with this too. You really want to get your covers, the grain of the book board running parallel to spine, because then you will get warping because it's thicker. But the thinner the paper, the less you do really have to worry about it. And you can, and there's things to do. So let's just say you went against the grain. You can put a closure on, and then no one is going to be any the wiser. So let's just say, where's my books? Let's just say I had put the grain going the wrong way and my book was like springing open. You just pop a closure on like that and no one's going to be any the wiser. So, but again, it's, you know, it's what you're willing to live with really in terms of paper grain. If a book springing open doesn't bother you, or you're happy to put a closure on it, go for it. You just really do want to avoid that cracking on the spine though. What other questions are there? So Deb says, is 80 pounds sulfite a nice enough paper for journal pages, or are papers like Canson or Strathmore nicer? I would say Canson and Strathmore are nicer, but I use the 80 pound sulfite a lot, like a lot. And the reason I use the 80 pound sulfite a lot is because I can buy it in reams and of like 500, and it's really cost effective. And I really like writing on it and doing mixed media work on it, and I feel like it's a little less precious. You'll spend a little more on Strathmore and Canson. Well, you will spend quite a bit more, and I would say it is a nicer paper. But sometimes I get like, if I'm using a really nice paper, sometimes I get a little hung up on like not wanting to use the journal, or like being afraid to, you know, mess it up because it's a more expensive paper. But I use the sulfite paper all the time and I love it. And because it's inexpensive, I feel like more of a sense of freedom with it. So again, personal choice. What else? Is that it? What is paste paper? Great question. Try to see if I've got a piece around here. We have, if you go to my YouTube channel, there are, I think, 3 videos all about paste paper. But essentially, paste paper is you get either methyl cellulose or a wheat paste, like a wheat paste glue. You mix like flour and water together to make a paste. There's bookbinding paste. There's a methyl cellulose. There's all different ways to make it with cornstarch. There's loads of different recipes, but make a flour and water paste. And then you add to it pigments from acrylic paints or other types of pigments. I generally just use acrylic paint. And then you, so it's kind of quite goopy and thick. And then you paint it onto your paper. And then you use different tools to create patterns in it. A little bit like jelly printing, like you would do patterns on a jelly plate and then print. This is sort of the other way around. You put down the colored paste and then say drag a comb through it, or drag, I don't know, a brush through it, and make different shapes and designs. And the thing with the paste paper is often the designs have like a 3D quality to them, just because of I guess I don't really know why, just because of the way you sort of put the tools down and then remove paste to create the patterns. It gives this like 3D effect. And then if the paste is thick enough, sometimes it's like slightly raised as well. So it has a really nice texture. And you can add glycerin to make it shiny. Paste papers are really fun. So after this video, go check out the rest of the paste paper videos on my channel, because it's a rabbit hole, that's for sure. Oh, and also, sorry, one more thing about paste papers is they're like they're really old. This is not a new thing. Like, people have been doing this for hundreds of years. It was sort of started in bookbinding studios or workshops years ago as a way to use up the paste that was left over at the end of the day. They didn't want to waste anything. So these are sort of like you had marbled paper end sheets. You will often find in different archives paste paper end sheets as well, and covers too. Any other questions, Amber? One more. Oh, good question, Jolly. Do you recommend tutorials on pre-bound hardback books with paper booklets? Yes, so Hollanders is a company out of Michigan and who sell the book blocks. I showed you one earlier. On their website, they have a tutorial on how to do it. And so it's just photo tutorial step by step. They also have a book as well. It's on my shelf somewhere. Let's see if I can find it. You know, I won't be able to find it off the top of my head. I can't see it. Oh, here. No. Yes, here it is. Let me grab it for you. This one right here. They also have a book, and that will show you how to do the case binding, but it is free on Hollander's website. So I'm sure Amber will perhaps put that in the chat, how that's spelled. But that is the best. And actually, I haven't ever found a video version. It's probably something we should add to our list, actually, because it's not difficult once you, know a few tips and tricks. Anything else? Will mat board work instead of bookboard, says Pepper Wolf. I find when I use mat board, so you can use mat board for smaller books. So if you've got like a little 3x3 book or something fairly small, 4x4 at the most, you can use mat board. Make sure you get the grain going the right way. But it is a little on the thin side. So if I want to use mat board, say someone's given you some, leftover, like a framer's given you loads of leftovers, what I would do is laminate two pieces together. So put stipple on some PVA, stick two pieces together for your covers. And then I feel like that is a lot more sturdy than just a single piece of mat board. But if you do want to use a single piece, just make sure your book is small. I wouldn't go with a larger book with a single piece of mat board. Good question. Anything else? Amber's just looking. She's just looking. Did she answer the question about best paper to use for a soft cover? Well, I didn't say what the best paper was for a soft cover. Well, there's cork fabric or cork paper. That's good. There's leather. There is handmade paper. That's what I mostly use, is handmade paper, like a thick handmade paper or two thin pieces put together. And that's why I was talking earlier about putting matte medium on there. So handmade paper. You can also use scrapbook paper. So if you've got a nice scrapbook paper that you like. The only thing with scrapbook papers is the inside, when you fold it, sometimes along the fold it's white on the inside. So if you're going to use scrapbook paper for a soft cover, I would score it and just be careful that you don't get that white showing on the crease. But what else? Watercolor paper. Printmaking paper. So, £140 watercolor paper is lovely. You can use a thicker Cardi paper, like the 320 GSM Cardi paper you could use for a cover. You can even use mixed media paper. It might be a little on the thin side, but you could use a mixed media paper, but definitely a printmaking paper, like a Rives BFK printmaking paper would be lovely. So yeah, there's lots of different options. I would say you have a paper and you love it and it's just on the thin side, just double it up or make it, sturdier. So, but yes, lots of choices for soft covers for sure. Any other questions? What's the difference between chipboard and bookboard? Asked Tammy. Okay, so bookboard is specifically made for bookbinding, and but like chipboard, it has lots of paper fibers in it. But the bookboard, when they create bookboard, they compress it with a lot more force. So I'm just showing you. So they make the book, they have all the fibers and they form it into the sheets, but then the pressure that it's put under for bookboard is a lot greater than it is for chipboard. So the fibers in the chipboard are sort of a lot more loosely distributed, which means it warps more easily. Whereas bookboard is a lot more sort of rigid and like solid and dense, and so it doesn't warp as much. So that my understanding is that is the difference between bookboard and chipboard. That's often why when you get chipboard, it'll bow, whereas the bookboard won't. But again, like the mat board, if you have chipboard, you can always double it up, and then that's going to make it stronger and less likely to warp. So what else? Any other questions? Nope. We're done. My goodness, an hour's worth of paper questions. All right, my friends, linked down below, you will find some links to videos, one about paper grain, if you'd like to know more about paper grain and understand it. And then there's a longer video all about how to create the perfect signature. So I only gave you a little overview today. Also linked down below are links to my favorite papers and also all of our social links and where to find us online, including at the handmadebookclub.com. And if you are not in the book club and would like an invitation, please go to handmadebookclub.com and then scroll down and there will be a button to request an invitation to join. All right, my friends. If you've liked this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you have other questions, feel free to put them in the comments below and we'll get to them as soon as we can. And I'll catch you very, very soon. Have a wonderful week and a wonderful weekend and enjoy making things with paper. Take care, folks.